Today we have an important guest for our program. Discuss about Google's action recently signed an agreement with the Mainland Chinese government. So today, regarding this issue, we invited Washington State Senator candidate Mr. David Strider.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We also invited a Chinese student and who just completed his master's degree, Mr. Long Xiao Li. Thank you for coming to our program. And so today we'll discuss about Google have been starting the new program with the Chinese government, put censorship on the mainland Chinese online service. This have a big influence to the Chinese society. And many of our Chinese human rights and democracy organizations, as well as religious groups, underground Christian churches, all against Google, this kind of activities. So what do you think, Mr. Li?
Well, don't be evil used to be Google's motto. And apparently Google made a move by dropping this motto. And for Google, it seems a smart move, since what Google is doing right now is the exact contrary of don't be evil. And in my opinion, this is one of the many evidences that the Chinese Communist Party is corrupting the universal value worldwide. This is bribery.
Yeah,
I think.
I definitely think this is an international bribery.
Chicom is using the profit potential in its billion population market to bribe entities from civilized world to obey or even promote its sinister value. But when we shame Google on these activity for conforming the censorship, we should not forget other scandalous misdeeds conducted by other foreign entities.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, once jacked on the street of Beijing in adulation to prove how Beijing is a smog-free city and how he is pleasant or pleasure to conduct business there.
We saw the U.S. hearing in the government, and Mr. Zuckerberg from the Facebook and admitted they did that, which is sharing the profit with the Chinese Communist regime, just like Google. And they try to get that market some benefit out of it by bend down the international value, which is human rights and democracy. So,
Yeah, one thing, when you start curbing freedom of speech, and when we have companies in the United States that go along with another country's wanting to censor their own people, but also our own country stopping our companies, we need to stop supporting it. During World War II, okay, we had people like Henry Ford, the Koch brothers' father, we had the Bush family, who were aiding Adolf Hitler. And when this got to Franklin Roosevelt, FDR's desk, he told them, stop. Okay, and they knew why they had to stop, because that meant you either stop or we arrest you and we seize your company and we have your company do what we needed to do to defeat Nazism. And so we've had that in our nation for a long time. We've had one president that stood up. We had one president that stood up to it right away when the whole world was at war. And now we have a president today who is willing to make sure that, yes, if Zuckerberg wants to do business with China and Facebook, and there is a Facebook version of Chinese version of Facebook, then yeah, but the Chinese government has control on censorship. And it's kind of like I'm a big business and I need my stores in other places, but I don't want to take the expense of putting those stores there, so I sell franchises. And that's what Zuckerberg has done to China and to Japan and other places where the government has a little bit of control coming in, is franchises to that nation, especially when it's a government that has a strict control over the people. And so it's a franchise business, and that's why Zuckerberg, well, no, yeah, it's my business and everything, but at the same time, it's their country, so.
That is a very smart way of, get around facing the human rights crisis in China.
Yes.
And this is really actually support the Chinese communist dictatorship regime to suppress the Chinese people and keep arresting human rights and religious rights and democracy activists in China. Because based on what we found out, Google have been letting those investors getting into their emails when they do the online development. And this is totally in violation of individual rights. And plus in China, this is under the Xi Jinping further dictatorship regime will prosecute people even further and heavier. And so this is definitely we cannot support. And we call for Google stopping doing it as soon as possible. We also hope the U.S. government step in, stop this kind of a company illegal activity against human rights value, against religious rights. And in the past, we against Google, against Yahoo and Microsoft, and against their censorship. And in the U.S., we also against the censorship put a regulation on those internet services providers. And so that's why today many of us are very mad at Google to do this kind of thing. And we also online called for Chinese human rights and religious rights people. If you were arrested, you have evidence the Chinese government arrested you because of the information you published online. We have a right to sue Facebook and Google because this is just fair. Based on the previous experience, Yahoo paid big money for getting Chinese people arrested. This has already happened. So today, U.S. big company should not do the same thing what happened before.
Yeah, exactly. Anytime there's a violation of speech, when you take away a person's freedom to speak, to express themselves, you also take away some of the other rights that we hold dear here in this country.
Yes.
Because if we have our freedom of speech, but then we choose not to admit to this or that, that's why we have screen names when we go into Facebook. I use my real name. I'm not afraid to say who I am. I never have been. But on Tumblr, in my campaign, I am Samurai Senate Dave. I'm a katana-wielding SOB. I mean, I'm just a real bad mofo. And a group on Tumblr would all be arrested and thrown into prison because of their freedom of speech, the way they speak. They hold nothing back. And I think it's beautiful. But we as a nation, we don't need to send military activity into another country. We don't need to stop sending them goods and embargo. We don't need to be doing that. We don't. It's the people we need to be thinking about. What is happening to the people? And if we, in good conscience, send humanitarian aid, and the rest of the world sees humanitarian aid going to and standing up for people's rights, okay, We could be doing that with North Korea, sending them humanitarian aid, and also making sure that, we address the human rights thing. But we continue the humanitarian aid, making sure that there's medical supplies for the people, making sure that there's food for the people, things like that. You can build bridges by looking toward the people rather than serving their government. We are the United States of America. We serve no government. We serve no king, no queen, no dictator, although our country has put a few in office. We serve no one. And we call ourselves a republic and an icon of freedom, the land of freedom, free speech, and everything else. And then I look at it this way. We need to start looking and living that way. And that's why I've decided to run for U.S. Senate, was because we need to change the way the world looks at us. When there is wrong in the world, we need to speak up. We need to let the world know that we do not do that. Are we going to send in our military? No, we're not. I mean, I can't, we don't need to have war, but at the same time, I can't do genocide either. And basically what's happening and where this nation's headed and what China is experiencing right now, we're not too far behind what is happening in China, censorship and everything. And Google and Facebook here and other groups, media, they've got an algorithm now which they call shadow banning. My campaign has been censored. But yes, it's all about censorship. And what is happening here in America during our election is censorship. And you have a long amount of information about censorship there in China.
Yes, correct. And it's not only the censorship problem, but I think the aim of Google's return is perhaps data, because in this artificial intelligence era, user data means profit potential, and Google tracks network traffic generated by its users and analyze said traffic to profile those users. All these analysis and profiles are invaluable for improving Google's various algorithms. Mm-hmm. And if any American citizens are listening to our program, I hope they understand the Google's return to China is not only an international problem, but also is domestic, because all these data gathered in China and improved algorithms implemented in China could be also used to track US network traffics and used to profile US citizens. Is becoming more and more creepy.
And also, I feel like recently, it seems like we concentrated on Russia quite a bit and didn't even mention about the Chinese regime have been getting into our system. And the Chinese government spent about a 6 months period of time and already set up the entire international-wide, worldwide network. And so the Chinese government supported online service, and as if they're doing normal, regular business. But actually, they are setting up all the traction points for their online service. Even they losing money, they still keep doing it. Why? It's because they want to collect all the data and use it against Chinese human rights activists in the overseas. And this is a serious problem. But recently in the US, we did not mention about the Chinese regime, what they are doing.
No, but there hasn't been any information at all. Only the trade and balancing the trade and then the tariff wars. That's the only thing we've heard. We haven't heard anything about freedom of speech and censorship. We haven't heard anything about that. And we get, we're in America, we have that. I mean, my cell phone, if I go someplace, it asks me if I want to check in at the Burger King at this street here, or did I enjoy my stay yesterday at the hospital? You know, what did I do? Because it's tracking me. Even when this is off, it's tracking me. Yeah. Even when your phone is off, it's still tracking you. Okay?
Yeah, I think human rights, U.S. Human Rights Committee, Congressman Smith used to, several years ago, pointed out that a lot of cell phones, without taking the battery out, the phone will keep tracking you and where you are when you did what. And so in the U.S., after 9/11, we just don't want terrorists doing any harm, any more harm to U.S. Citizens.
Right.
However, seems like it's everybody is treat everybody as if you are a terrorist.
That's right.
So this big subject is still being discussed, isn't it?
It is, because on Google, on the internet, it'll ask me if I want to be turn on tracking. Well, I have tracking on my email because I need to find out what IP address it's going to and has it been read. Especially being a candidate, I want to make sure it was delivered to the right person, and I want to make sure that they've opened it. And if it sits there and unopened in their box for 3 or 4 days, if I got a telephone number, I'll call them and say, hey, listen, did you get that email I sent you? Response to what you asked? But no, we allowed, after 9/11, we signed away our rights. America let our politicians sign away our rights. Yes,
Patriot Act.
we gave it to them. And that has to be repealed because we are acting like an empire. And if you want to stop terrorism, quit bombing tents, quit bombing schools, quit bombing hospitals, quit giving militant arms to countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Quit giving them arms, because all they're doing, Saudi Arabia is committing genocide to the Yemenis. Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. Jimmy Carter had actual peace talks going on with Yasser Arafat and the Israeli government. And we get Ronald Reagan, and we got arms for hostages, Iran-Contra, So our nation is no better than what's happening in China, and our nation goes all the way back. I've seen it. I was in the military when it happened, and it is a travesty that they do it in the name of America. In God we trust, so they say. And that in God we trust didn't happen until the Cold War with the Soviet Union.
I think U.S. Can do better.
Yes.
And so basically a lot of Chinese escaped from China. It's still because of U.S. have more freedom, and the life here is better, but it can be improved better.
Yes.
And so we just feel like the U.S. value is basically like other Western world value. Human rights is respected, and so the certain point, any countries or individual sometimes make mistakes.
Can I add something here, Jane?
Yes, please.
People talk about immigration being a problem in our country. Those people who are coming up from Latin America, South America, and Central America, those people are not immigrants. Those people are refugees. We have a refugee crisis at our southern border, and they want to put a wall up. My answer to that is no wall. Okay? And the reason I say that is we did our best to overturn and our CIA paid for hit squads. We set up drug cartels so that drugs could get to this nation so that they could sell them to the population. And so we have our government corrupted in Central America. We have it corrupted in South America. We are not being a republic. We're letting our secret government, our secret CIA and other units go in there and set up hit squads, kill squads. And then we talk about, endorsing censorship, allowing censorship in China by two of our companies, Facebook and Google.
Yeah,
by turning over data. They got mine too, okay? Or I don't get service.
It's not only Facebook and Google, also Cisco and
Cisco
Apple.
System.
Yes. Cisco
Any
has
virus
built a firewall in China.
Virus protection,
Yes.
if you go McAfee or any other virus protection, what do? You surrender your information.
Yes, that is actually a bandit human rights value. And there are so many human rights activists were arrested because of their speech, because of their publication. Recently, Mr. Li was interviewed after Xi Jinping became Chinese new emperor, because it doesn't need a term limitation. So what happened is after Mr. Li made a speech against the Chinese regime, what happened?
Well, my mom is summoned into one of the Chinese Communist Party's secretary's office, and the secretary demanded my mom to ask me to stop.
See,
That's it.
Yeah, obviously the Chinese regime is reading and watching U.S. information. Either you publish New York Times, which is Mr. Li's case was mentioned there, and he was interviewed there, and also Voice of America. They must be listened. And then they start threatening Mr. Long Xiaoli's family. And
Sure.
this is a kind of a Chinese dictatorship regime using the non-censored U.S. information against our Chinese citizen in the abroad. And however, if it is inside China, they use those information against the people who cannot do anything. No rights to even have a knife, and no rights of publication, no rights of speech, and no rights of religion, no rights of assembly. Anything you can talk about, even voting or be voted rights, is totally ignored and robbed by the Chinese communist dictatorship.
So your mother basically has been threatened
Yes, my family.
because of what you've done here in the March of Freedom for your people
Yes.
back home.
Yes.
And even though you're not, even though they're censoring the airways, even Voice of America, said they can't stop all the airways and electronic transmission, but what you are saying is truth. And what you're saying scares them to death. And all I can say to you, brother, okay, don't stop.
Thank you.
Don't stop.
Thank you.
I am a son of the American Revolution. General Cornwallis, the King's general, surrendered to my mother, to General Washington at my grandmother's house. And
What an honorable thing.
oh yes, and it's a national monument now. It's called the Moore House. And she married into the family. Okay, she married my great grandfather. She became my great grandmother. They had babies. You know how that works. All right. So anyway, being here since 1737 as a family of ministers, church, leaders and brawlers. Brawlers meaning we like to fisticuff. Or fight or debate or get in your face, if you're lying, and we can thank grandfather Johann for that, because it just went through, but all generations. And so my family's been fighting for freedom and standing up for freedom. We volunteered for military. We didn't get drafted, okay?
Thank you.
And during World War II, the war that my father was in, Chinese and Americans had one common enemy. Who? Japan.
Yes.
And we and what we did in China with flying
Tigers,
supplies. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it was a massive thing that was going on, and the Chinese people suffered greatly. I mean, Shanghai was one of the places for a massive genocide effort
And Nanjing.
Nanjing. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, all along the coast to control the people, because the Japanese couldn't go too far inland because they didn't have the military might to do that. They would have had to murder everybody in the countryside. And so that's why Japan couldn't move inland. And I'm grateful for that.
We
And then-
greatly appreciate the U.S. support.
Well,
Thank you
there
so
was
much.
there was very little support at the beginning. I mean, the best we could do was, volunteers, fighter pilots, and then the planes that came over, they were dilapidated P-40 fighters, no match for a Japanese Zero, but we learned how to defeat them, but we have been allies. We helped defeat totalitarianism,
Yes.
imperialism,
Yes.
and now China, our president says, he hears the Philippine president say he's president for life, and then the Chinese president saying president for life, and our president says, I think that's a pretty good idea. We should try it. I don't think Mr. Trump should even go that way, because there are
I
too
think
many
it is a
United
joke,
States-
isn't it?
well, whether it's I don't know about him sometimes. There are over 9 million veterans who will not let an emperor come out. Okay? That is 9 million veterans who will descend on Washington, D.C. Will we have weapons? No. No. But if you shoot at us, that's a problem, because we also have men and women in service. How many men and women in service are going to uphold and become and let themselves be called an empire? An empire cannot stand, not on the grounds that we are. And we've already gone 300 years into being a nation. How many years do you think we make it as an empire? Not very long, because I don't think the world would care dropping bombs, nuclear bombs on America.
I think the President Trump and the U.S. government right now is doing economic sanction on China. It's pretty good, and that communist regime is pretty threatened by this.
You know where
isn't
your where your apple's made, don't you? In
Yeah.
China.
Assembled
So,
in China.
yeah, assembled in China. So
Yeah.
you know, how long do you think that'll stand? And Ivanka Trump, the daughter of Trump, her clothing is made in China. So I mean, that is free of the tariffs. That's free of the all that stuff, and the apple is too.
But
so,
the free trade does not mean out of balance trade, because every year we imported way more stuff from China, and U.S. Exported to China way less. That means every year this way, if it's not corrected, U.S. will have a way more deficit. So I think President Trump is really doing great thing. I really think U.S. government is doing good thing about this. But I really hope U.S. government put more control on high-tech export to the Chinese government regime.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to let the people of China know how we stand. Now, there's going to be propaganda. I mean, you can't turn on mainstream, Fox News, whatever. You're going to get what the government wants you to hear. Okay, I mean, face it, folks. We are in a censored type environment right now, when political candidates who are running against incumbents can't get the voting records, the voting polls, registered voters, so that they can do phone banks and stuff like that. When they can't get that information, that is, the DNC is what caused our corruption in the 2016 elections. And
Democrats, huh?
The Democrats.
Yes.
They said, well, we're a club, we don't have to adhere to that. But people entrusted their vote to the Democratic National Committee to make sure that the right candidate got there. And you lied to them, you took their money, and no, Hillary Clinton and
Is
her
that
group,
verified already?
that's verified. It's been proven in court. It's been proven in court.
Which state is that?
It was a U.S. District Federal Court. And,
For corruption by the
yes,
Democrats?
and it said we don't have to abide by those rules. We're a club. We're like a clubhouse. A social organization, like a fraternity or sorority.
I think in the end, still back to the original value
Yes.
of a country, of an organization,
But
what we are supporting it. And so that's why we think the human rights should be above everything. If you want to do business, can I earn money if you were killed by somebody else? I get $2 million. Is this a fair trade? Because there is agreement.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not fair, because human lives is traded. It's betrayed your rights. And so right now, Google and Facebook and Sysco System is helping Chinese regime to jail more Chinese democracy and human rights activists.
If we go with the logic in your way, then pretty much all of these multinational corporations are in fault, are ashamed, because, well, we have these corporations have factories set up in China is exactly because of the low human rights advantages in China since they can pay lower wages, have longer work hours.
Okay, why overseas companies could go to China to do the investment? It is because of low cost.
Yes.
Because of their system is not fully established, complete yet.
Because they can oppress Chinese worker.
Yes.
They have lower human rights than an American worker, comparatively.
Living in a room small, if you were to divide this room, they have room enough for their place to lay down, a mat that they can lay down for their sleep, and they're on schedule. And we had unions. The reason we have unions today is because of those types of working conditions. And for our companies, to say, well, yeah, we're gonna make a lot of profits. Well, guess what? And they're not paying a dime on those profits. Okay, they're taking money out. They're taking resources from those people, from the Chinese people, by sapping their strength, their energy, and putting it into a product. That phone, like you have, the phone that I have. We're sucking all those resources, that knowledge. All they can do is think about getting up, resting, eating something. Working, trying to provide for family or themselves. And that's all they can think about. They can't think about tomorrow. They can't have a dream of what it might be if I was a teacher or a scientist or this or that, because they're too busy trying to live day to day. Mm-hmm. And that is not right. And by us agreeing to that, our nation is no better than the Chinese government. Our leaders in our country are no better than the leadership in China. And that's why here 2018, the elections are so important. Because we don't want that type of governance anymore. Okay? We don't want those people who take money and put it in their pocket, and then they ask us for money too, and then they listen to the guys that put the money in their pocket. That is not the way governance is done, and those are the kind of people who are going to go to jail. Those are the kind of people that I have a warrant with their name on it.
So what we would like to do about this Google system, Sysco system, and Apple, and also any one of them in violation of human rights and religious rights, and put a censorship in the Chinese online services. We want to ask the U.S. government to get involved. And there should be a hearing about those companies. And Google and GoDaddy used to be a pretty good company, and they didn't bend down to the Chinese Communist regime. Mm-hmm. And that was when we have the Congress hearing when Yahoo, mainly Yahoo, in violation of censorship and working with the Chinese regime. And so now we would like to ask the U.S. government and to do the same hearing to correct this mistake.
Yes, I agree with that completely.
True.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and
Thank you.
we hope to see you soon again. Thank you.